Hello, friends. You've probably heard coaches and teachers say things like, you are source, you are awareness, you are the operant power. Just assume and it's done. And although I absolutely believe and know those things are true, what I've noticed over and over again with clients is that most people do not actually understand what those statements mean and how to apply them in everyday life. And how could you when it's the exact opposite of what you've been conditioned to believe pretty much your entire life? So you try to believe, you affirm, you try to visualize, and you try to feel it real. But the moment circumstances push back, and they do, the moment fear comes up, the moment nothing looks different yet, of course, you fall right back into doubt, worry, checking, reacting, and trying to force something to happen. Why? Because I believe no real foundation of understanding was built first. And if the foundation underneath all of this is weak, eventually the whole thing starts wobbling. So, what I decided to do with this series and inside the New Story Lab is to back way up and start from the beginning. Is it the only way to do it? No. However, it's a way that I know works. And this works because you are powerful. You are not powerless, and you're not misunderstanding it because you aren't smart enough. It's because you and most others have spent your entire lives identified as the human character reacting to circumstances. Of course you have. Of course I did. That's how we were raised. So before people can truly live from the understanding that they are awareness, they are source, they are consciousness, whatever word you want to use, you first benefit by beginning the understanding of what has actually been happening in your own mind all day long. And that starts with understanding the subconscious mind. Now, I'm talking from the human experience. The subconscious mind is what drives your automatic reactions, emotional patterns, expectations, assumptions, and experiences. The conscious mind chooses. But what you repeatedly think about, emotionally dwell on, rehearse, fear, expect, and identify with eventually impresses itself into the subconscious mind. And once something begins feeling natural and true, you start living from it automatically. So, this is why repetition matters. And it's why inner conversations matter. Now, most people are already affirming every single day. Well, actually, everyone is. The thing is, what are you affirming in your internal dialogue and possibly outside? Most people are affirming nothing changes. I'm exhausted. I'm broke. Nobody chooses me. And this never works for me. And it's not being said once or twice, but hundreds and hundreds of times internally throughout the day. And so it's no wonder why those experiences keep repeating. And this is where people get confused about techniques because techniques are not the power. I'm going to say that again. Techniques are not the power, they're a tool to use. You are the power. The techniques are merely training steps helping you interrupt old conditioning long enough to begin experiencing something different internally, something that really makes you look at what you're doing and the power that you have. So, I don't know how many of you might remember the movie Dumbo, but it was such a beautiful movie telling us this same story, and so many movies do. In the movie, Dumbo was given a feather. Now, the feather was never the power, but Dumbo believed it was. And because he believed in the feather, he finally relaxed enough to access the ability that was already his. Same thing with Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. She thought the ruby slippers were the power, but Glinda finally tells her, you had the power all along. And that's what eventually happens here, too. But if you don't believe that, you can't access it. So at first, people may need affirmations, repetition, visualization, or structured steps because they do not yet trust themselves or trust the law or even that it is law or understand their own power. So we use the steps, not because the steps are magic, but because the steps will get you there, because they help retrain the mind, interrupt old conditioning, and build understanding and belief. Eventually, the deeper realization begins happening, and you understand I never was separate from the power. I am the power. But trying to jump there straight intellectually without first understanding your own conditioning is why, in my experience, so many people stay stuck for years. And that's why I teach this step by step. Not step 1 and jumping to step 20. It's step 1, and then step 2, and then step 3, and on and on. And as people begin understanding what they're doing internally in their imagination, things start changing naturally because they stop unconsciously working against themselves all day long. Inside the New Story Lab, one person had things click deeply in the first week and stopped constantly worrying about whether what she wanted was coming. Another person, after struggling with a very serious health issue for more than a decade, started feeling remarkably better and enjoying life again during the second week. Others are connecting the dots week by week, not because the way I teach is magic, but because truly understanding changes everything and relieves frustration and the endless looping. And when people finally understand both the law and themselves, they stop fighting against the process and start working with it deliberately instead of accidentally. Again, that's why I created the lab, not to give you more manifestation tricks, but to walk you step by step into understanding your own mind, your own conditioning, your own power, and ultimately your own freedom. And that's exactly what this series is about. So, thanks for listening, for sharing and commenting. Stay well, dear friends. I'll see you next time.